All right, hello, this is Wmpyr here with my conclusion to this book right here. Okay, so this is, I'm summoning up chapter 3 and 4. Okay, so chapter 1 was the real Miyamoto Musashi. Chapter 2 was the rivals of Musashi. Chapter 3, the world of traditional Bujutsu. In chapter 4, the famous schools of Bujutsu. So there's really only 4 chapters. The last two, number 3 and number 4, I'm just combining together in this one video, and I'm also going to combine my conclusion, so to speak, my final thoughts. Okay, chapter 1, chapter 2, fascinating. Really interesting to me. Chapter 3, chapter 4 also had it, but not as much. And my overall conclusion was, do I recommend this book? And the answer is no, unfortunately. That's just my honest opinion. The reason why I say no is even though the topic is fascinating, okay, and this dude who has a lot of connections is this author, and he has a lot of scrolls and stuff like that, just to cut to the chase, his opinions seemed really biased to me. Like, he's very politically motivated. It felt, for lack of a better word, and I don't mean to badmouth the guy, but this is, I guess, kind of doing that, is it sounded elitist to me. In other words, if you don't have the lineage, he's kind of like, you're not the warrior way kind of thing. So it just sounded like when he was saying that modern Budo is not connected to the warrior way and stuff like that, and without really going into his detail, it just sounds like he's bad-mouthing it, so I didn't really care for a lot of those kinds of opinions. The other part, more technical, I would have to say, is in a book like this, kanji becomes very important, because the kanji will tell me or tell the reader, what kanji is used. Like for this, the kanji for sky or the kanji for water or something like that is used. If you don't put that in there, you're missing out on like a great 20, maybe even 30% of the book in itself, of the meaning, the writing. So for me, that was super disappointing. The other part is there was a lot of like technique shown like this, and this extremely hard to follow. Most of it, I was just like, whatever, Now there was small tidbits that I could gather, and I was like, that's really cool. But a lot of it, you can't really follow it. It looked like it just teleported, and I was like, what's going on? Who's the attacker? Who's the defender? Can't tell. So very sad in that sense. A lot of that is in here, and a lot of that is wasted. Okay, all right, so chapter 3 and 4, so those are the reasons why I don't recommend this book, right? That being said, what the author brings out and he gets from his scrolls or talking with the other masters that also had scrolls, that stuff is very interesting, because then the stuff is coming from writing, not necessarily himself. His opinions, like I said, felt very politically biased to me, but the stuff that he took out from the scrolls, and that's what I'm gathering, is that he took it out from the scrolls. Very interesting stuff. And now, how much of that is true, we don't know. Because just because it comes from the scrolls, ancient scrolls, doesn't mean that it is fact, right? But there were some very interesting things in there. And I already talked about the Musashi stuff, the famous duel at Ganryujima with Kojiro, Musashi's probably greatest rival. I talked about all that in chapter 1, chapter 2. But now, like I said, let me focus on chapter 3 and 4. So with chapter 3 and 4, looking at it, he goes into like kind of like before Kendo. So he kind of hints into how like Kendo was formed, wearing the armor and the real famous Japanese sport of Kendo. he starts going into that kind of stuff. Jiu-jitsu, empty hand techniques are in here. Armor fighting is in here as well. So all that is introduced. But looking at this, honestly, my opinion was that anything and everything that we could think of, it's already been thought of. That was my honest opinion. Fighting with two swords, it's in here. Fighting with, like a knife and a sword, or a shorter sword and a longer sword, a spear, like I said, with armor, going empty hand, mixing that with the sword, going up against the sword with empty hand, throwing the sword, and then going into other crazy weapons, the chain weapons and stuff like that is mentioned in here. It's just everything you could think of. Oh, using the scabbard of the sword, all that's in here, and it really made me think these people from back then, and there's not just one person, it's lots of people, lots of students, lots of schools, generations, over like 150 years or more, because we're talking about like from the 16th century, the 1500s on, this stuff had been, and of course a lot of the schools have been lost, or they've been researching and trying to revive it, stuff like that. But we're talking like hundreds of years of material, just people have thought of everything. So that's one thing I want to say, okay? Now it's just piecing it together into a tangible system. That's a separate story, because that has to be done case by case, person by person, era by era. Like me doing martial arts in the 90s, and then me seeing martial arts in the 80s, and me doing martial arts today. It's not the same, So those are some of the things that we got to address when making it a tangible, usable material. But as far as like resource, just this comes from ancient Japan, at least in this case, and some of this stuff he talked about, like invasions from Korea back then, of course the Mongols, and dealings with the Chinese and stuff like that. It's just amazing stuff. They thought of it all, right? So that's a huge thing that I noticed, right? Number two, and this is another one that the author kind of repeats over and over again, is the religious aspect, okay? And when you think religion, all of a sudden it's like this, I don't know how to say it, but now you're thinking, oh, it's religion. Here in the West, we think, oh, there's different religions. And this is more like in combat, I would say this is closer to sports psychology. Okay, so like you have an MMA fighter, right, and wants to do better in combat, and sometimes they feel like maybe it's the mind, so they go to a sports psychologist. So I would say religion here is in the West, for a Western person to understand, oh, religion, I don't want to go into that. No, think of it more like sports psychology. That's what it is. Because we're talking about combat. We're talking about battlefield, or we're talking about duels. We're talking about fighting, combat, right? So this is what this book is about. This book is about combat. So within that realm, the religion part is really for that. Okay, how can you live better for the sake of combat? How can you, because we're talking about skills that could potentially kill somebody, and not just the skills, you're using a weapon that could take a life. So when you do that, it's not just, oh, you killed a person, wow, you're a badass, you're awesome, and that's it. No, you got to live with that. People want revenge. Government's going, what happened? There's a lot of things that go on, and that's the reality. So this really has to, because at that time they would allow, and the book even mentions stuff like that, like certain revenge matches were allowed between the samurai class, revenge and counter revenge matches. So that's kind of stuff is mentioned in here as well. And also the famous 47 Ronin is briefly mentioned. Also Shinsengumi, which is it was from this book, and I was surprised because in the movies in Japanese history, when I see it on film or on TV, the Shinsengumi is always portrayed as like this young, good-looking bunch of, the next generation type of people. But in here, he kind of mentions them almost like they're the KGB or Nazi police, the Gestapo, something like that. And they were just like, kind of like in Star Wars where they were taking out the Jedi. So these guys were just going after samurai and taking them out. So that was like a new view for me. I was like, whoa, that's the Shinsengumi. And then of course, the with the 47 the Ronin, they go into, it's talking about like this religious tie. And once again, when I say religion, think of it as sports psychology. Okay, they're trying to make it ethically, morally, spiritually make sense, make it right. Therefore, they don't have to go, am I doing the right thing? Because we're going to go in and take lives. So it better be 100% right. I don't want to have doubt. I don't want to be like, is this good or not? What if I'm doing the wrong thing? Because you're making action that has tremendous consequences here. You're destroying families. You're you know what I mean. So they understood that they're not stupid. They want that full weight, and they want to still be able to operate within that. So that's why the religion part comes in. But also in the training, the religion part comes in. Because you're training so that you could do that. You could have a clear mind and make a decision and be strong in battle. When I see like Conor McGregor in his prime, he was using it to have a strong mind and then have the other person, his opponent's mind, be like all, shaky, and then he's able to perform better that way. And then it's unfortunate that it seemed like reversed, or like reversed on himself, even without an opponent. Now his own mind became all shaky, and he had trouble living normal life, is what it looked like to me from an outside viewer. I don't know the guy, so but him using those kinds of psychological warfare, very sound. And in order to do that, like I said, you yourself have to have a solid, mind. If not, you can't do that, right? So that part I could definitely see used. If I feel like the samurai went a step further, in a which that not only would they use psychological warfare, but they would use psychological warfare, but also make sure that they themselves were grounded. That's why they didn't have that backlash that he had, in my opinion. And by backlash, I mean to himself. He did it to himself, like Mike Tyson kind of talked about not having an off switch, whereas the samurai would be able to, after combat, you destroy the opponent, you turn into a war god, and you become a deity and you annihilate the opponent. Now where's your off switch? Because if you don't have that and you go live like that, you're probably going to get, someone's going to get revenge on you, in the worst ways. They're going to backstab you in non-combat ways, and take you out or make you fall or take all your money or set you up or who knows what. They're going to find ways to defeat you. So you need that off switch, right? And that is where this comes into play. But now let me go into the training part. The religion also takes place with the training because, and this has happened to me, the best way I could describe it is, once again, when I mention religion in your training, people get really turned off by that, right? Once again, for fighting wise, it's like going to a sports psychologist. Training wise, it's almost like tapping into your subconscious, because that's where you want the techniques. You want the techniques in muscle memory. You want it here where it automatically comes out, right? Bruce Lee talked about that. So for that to happen, you have to be communicating with that mind, you know, because if it's only here, then for this, who knows if it's going in, if it's sinking in there or not. And this is another proof of that is Shannon Dallas Hall, American Gladiator. I saw her in the Kung Fu Championships in Dallas. I didn't go see it, but I remember the event, and I talked to people that, you know, I don't know if they were at the event, but anyway, it was a big event here in Texas. And she, I remember, was in that event. And that was also the first time I got to see Kung Lee, who later became a MMA legend. But she talked about, like, she was doing women's tough women boxing kind of thing, and people would criticize her and say, like, where's your form? Why don't you get an actual trainer and train properly? And she's like, I did all that. You think I didn't do that? I did that. It just takes time for it to come out. So in my opinion, in that sense, she was kind of lacking that connection to the subconscious. Like, how do you speed that up? You know, for her, she was probably just, well, you just train and you fight and you try to make it come out as best as you can. Just keep doing that, keep doing that. But that's where, to me, the samurai and the ancient warriors, they were trying to figure out ways to make that happen quicker, make that happen more effective. And that's where this religion type thing happens. And I swear to you guys, some of my best, they're not enlightenments, but they're like some things that just click. All of a sudden it clicks and you go, I think I got it, you know, or, oh, I'm going to try this technique out. That stuff came to me from dreams. Okay, so it came from the subconscious mind. So it wasn't from my conscious mind. I had dreams, and the dreams taught me very, very valuable lessons to this day. Okay, and I've always held that very sacred. And sometimes you could have what I call a waking dream, where in training you're wide awake, you're doing it, and you just see this, and you go, "Oh, I think I just had a waking dream." So that's more rare, but having it from the dream. That's what this kind of thing sounds like. But in this here, where they're purposely really driving, they're really driving for that. For me, it was more, I'm just obsessed. I'm just super into it, right? But these people, they're like really driving for that to happen, studying, reading scrolls, meditating under waterfalls, praying to gods, this and that they're trying to make it happen. Right? They're really, really making efforts. So the power of manifestation, and then boom, they'll have like a awakened dream or a dream or something where a mystical creature comes in and shows them a new technique. So that is kind of the way I want you guys to see it, rather than religion, because once again, I think a lot of people here in the West, we don't understand what that really means in that sense. And by religion, it's really not the typical idea here, of religion. So just wanted to clarify that. The author mentions that over and over again. Author also, once again, mentions the spear being the ultimate weapon for ancient battlefields. He talks about how important the spear is. And then one of the things it almost sounded insulting was he said that Musashi is not a high-level warrior. And because a high-level warrior would use a spear, Musashi doesn't use a spear, which I don't know how much of that is true. I don't think so, because Musashi's ancestor had a spear weapon. So, and the author says it himself. So it's kind of weird to me that Musashi would have that style in his arsenal, but not have spear techniques, whatever. But the author I think what the author was trying to say was that Musashi is an expert duelist. And he was trying to say the difference between a duel and a battle. So as impressive as it is going up against high caliber people in a duel, one-on-one match, and everything's on the line, your reputation and everything, but that and actually fighting in battlefields where hundreds of lives, thousand against 1,000, and hundreds of lives are lost. That's a whole nother story. True, it's different, but with this book, that's part of the stuff that I was saying to you guys, that lost in translation. Who knows what the author meant? I don't know. That's just me trying to figure out what he meant. So that's part of why I say at the end, overall, I can't recommend this book. There were some very, very interesting things in it, though. And even the interesting things, we don't know if it's 100% fact. Now, I believe that the author took it from real sources like the scrolls and whatever. So in that sense, it's real, but we don't know, just because it's written on the scroll doesn't mean that it's necessarily 100% true. So that's another thing, because I saw a documentary, a Japanese documentary, where they're talking about, in real life, more than likely, Musashi never dueled Sasaki Kojiro. That's what they said. And probably what really happened was Musashi's students just jumped the guy and killed the guy. So, just things like that, which I don't know how much of that is true. I'm just looking at that documentary, but, it's just something to think about. We really don't know is the answer, and for someone to say, I have the answer, that's just a person with a big mouth. So anyway, I I tried to give an honest as possible review. I wish the kanji was in here. I wish the more detail. There's a lot of misspellings in here. So that was another thing that kind of put me off, was I know certain things are just misspelled. Plain fact, I know it's wrong, and that to me is critical. So anyway, because if something's misspelled, that could be a totally different kanji, and when the kanji changes, was it the kanji that meant white, or was it the kanji that meant snow, or so that kind of stuff. I want to know, and that's missing. But anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for viewing, and take care, folks.